There are so many urban legends and mythological creatures that it's hard to keep track. From folklore to incredible tales meant to explain the world. We have 20 mythical creatures today that all in some form or another existed in real life. There are some incredible stories that all wow and shock and indeed have for centuries or even millennia. But what if these monsters really did walk the earth? Make sure you watch through to the end. For some creatures, you'd be surprised to have very humble beginnings. Dire wolves. Not just a thing of fantasy, dire wolves are a breed of extinct canine. They're one of the most famous prehistoric carnivores of North America, along with their contemporary competitor, Slimodon. They were an incredible predator, measuring nearly 5 feet from head to tail and weighing 150 to 200 pounds. They were about 25% bigger than most giant dogs alive today and 25% heavier than the most enormous gray wolves. Griffins. Stuff of legends. Griffins are said to be a creature with a lion's body and an eagle's head and wings. While what we understand as a griffin might not exist, not explicitly, there are similar creatures out there that may have led ancient people to this understandable conclusion. Scythian nomads mining gold in Central Asia as of the first millennium BC told stories of the fierce, eagle-beaked, lion-sized griffin that wandered in the mines, guarding the gold. Instead, these miners may have found skeletons of the Proceratops dinosaur and came up with their own backstory. Similar dinosaurs, including Tyrannosauratops and Sinoceratops, were found in the same mines. These creatures all had a different neck shield, and the Protoceratops had a bird-like beak. However, it was all about the size of a sheep. The Tyrannoceratops were similar, with the distinct difference being the size and its 2 front horns. In contrast, the Sinoceratops had just 1 horn on the front and was roughly the size of an elephant. While it's not as exciting as a lion-bodied eagle creature, this is pretty consistent with most depictions of griffins throughout history and cultures, meaning the chances are this is the actual creature behind the myth. Camelopard. Like one other on the list, the camelopard is actually a real but misidentified creature. They were considered monsters, camel and leopard hybrid, and dangerous. However, the camelopard is simply the medieval name for the beast we now call a giraffe. There are no magical properties, just a unique look and a strange marking that scared medieval travelers and explorers alike. Are you a cryptid lover? Do you love the idea of these mythological creatures really existing? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. Blimye. One of the more strange stories on our list today is that of the Blimye. Instead, these creatures were a nomadic kingdom of African people in northern Nubia between 600 and 300 AD. However, ever since the early origins, stories have been told of their headless nature. Legends told of the people with broad shoulders covered in hair, ears beneath their armpits, and most notably on the upper chest. They featured 2 large, bulging eyes and a face. Modern understanding suggests the headless legends came from their combat tactic of keeping their heads pressed close to the chest while half squatting a knee to the ground. Dobhar Chu. A creature of Irish folklore, the Dobhar Chu is said to resemble both a dog and an otter, but sometimes is described as a half-dog, half-fish. The creature lives in water and has fur with protective properties. We're likely looking at a formidable relative to the otter, which had been a predator around 6 million years ago. This is the Cynomygale malutra, and it was the size of a wolf at about 50 kilograms. These creatures had a powerful bite which would have allowed them to crush shells or the bones of birds and other mammals. Truthfully, little is known about the creature, but it was likely more of a formidable predator and easily could have been the stuff of legends. Nine-tailed fox. The tale of the nine-tailed fox is that of Asian folklore across many cultures. This is simpler to explain than a simple misunderstanding. The nine-tailed fox is as accurate as any other fox because they were simply ancient foxes. Foxes are commonplace in Japan, and the belief is that as the fox advanced in age, it would grow more tails over the years. While the magical properties likely don't exist in these creatures, it's easy to explain that these creatures exist. They're just not the stuff of legends. Gigantic squid. No talk of mythological creatures and cryptids would be complete without sea monsters. The Greeks spoke of a six-headed sea goddess named Scylla, while cultures in the Bahamas had a half-shark, half-octopus creature called the Lusca. This isn't even to mention Nordic legends of the Kraken, described as recently as the 18th century in Europe's first modern scientific world surveys. Finally, in 1853, Norwegian naturalists described the creature as a giant squid which existed deep beneath the depths. This is not a single squid, but a subspecies of deep ocean-dwelling squid, growing around 10 to 13 meters in length, from posterior fins to the top of the two longest tentacles. It is the single largest invertebrate on Earth, but it also has some of the largest eyes of any animal, larger than even great whales. They exist primarily in Antarctica's deep sea, but we can likely assume they could have lived all over due to changing ocean temperatures. Kraken. If not for giant squids, we may not have Kraken stories, but not all theories have to do with an actual creature. The Kraken, in a sense, might be real, but instead of a giant, deep-sea dwelling cephalopod, a treacherous whirlpool. Thanks to literature by the likes of Jules Verne, it's described as a legendary sea monster seen off the coast of Norway. This would lead to comparing the Kraken's boat-engulfing whirlpool when it submerged, compared to Norway's famed Moskromoon, known commonly as the Maelstrom. While it may have been just a giant squid in the waters to unseen eyes, the consistency with the Kraken's association with whirlpools leads many to believe that the real Kraken was just treacherous waters deep below. Moby Dick. Of course, Herman Melville's story Moby Dick is a work of fiction, but it was inspired by real-life events of an American whaling ship named Essex. The boat was rammed by a sperm whale on November 20th, 1820, and later sank. All 20 crewmen initially survived the shipwreck, but only 8 survived after their journey eventually devolved into cannibalism. While the whale might not have been quite the same, the encounter was what the climactic scene was based on and would long since be famous for. Sharpodus. Another distinct but similar sea creature includes the sea monsters Sharpodus and Scylla, who appear as challenges to epic creatures like Odysseus, Jason, and Arenas. She's said to be located in the Strait of Messina. Legend claims Sharpodus lives under a small rock on one side of the narrow channel, while Scylla lives under another. To be between Scylla and Sharpodus means to be presented with two opposite dangers. The task for these heroes was to find a way through safely. Similar to the Kraken of Norway, Sharpodus was said to be simply a giant whirlpool. A whirlpool, in fact, does not exist there and is caused by currents meeting there. However, it's not an epic danger as the story claims. It's dangerous only to small crafts in the worst conditions. While nearly all of these last three can be linked to a different thing, primarily whirlpools or giant squids, it's interesting to see how the creature's interpretation came up throughout cultures. Do you have one similar that you think we missed? There are plenty of sea monster stories to choose from, and if you think we missed an opportunity, we'd love to hear it from you down below. We're about midway through our video, just a few more creatures to go before seeing who made number 1. Do you have any guesses? Leave them in the comments now and check back and see how it holds up at the end. Emogi. The emogi is a mysterious creature said to have taken birth in a millennium, resembling a giant serpent and having defensive scales and acidic toxins. These creatures were more similar to dragons, though unlike the depictions of dragons, meant to be kind water and cave spirits in Korean folklore. The emoji depicted viciousness, destruction, cruelness, and despair. Instead of a real-life dragon, however, the emoji was likely tied more to monstrous snakes known as the Titanoboa. These massive creatures were 45 feet long and weighed more than 2,200 pounds. They easily could have been mistaken as dragons to unknowing observers. Titanoboa became extinct years ago but was first described in 2009 after being discovered in rocks exposed in Colombia in 2004. Werewolf. There have been many stories about man to werewolf transformation from 2100 BC with the Epic of Gilgamesh. However, ancient Greece and Rome had the first werewolves as we now know it. There had been plenty of accounts of real-life werewolves, though one in particular was the beast of Gavaudan, first spotted by a woman in the 18th century who was tending cattle in the forest of Langogne in the summer. Her bulls scared the creature off, but the attacks terrorized the small province of France with 210 attacks, 113 being fatal. It's believed that this was a wolf at the time, but more contemporary accounts claim it had been several wolves, as the slayings continued despite a wolf-killing campaign. While the initial scare could have been a larger-than-average wolf, any werewolf accounts were just misclassified animal attacks over the years, or attempts to sabotage ill-fated people through religious persecution, similar to the witch trials. Bunyip. Said to inhabit the swamps, billabongs, creeks, riverbeds, and waterholes in Aboriginal mythology of southeastern Australia, it's generally accepted that the bunyip is a cryptid that does not exist. The name usually means devil or evil spirit, though the original meaning may have been slightly different due to linguistic changes. The word came about first in 1812, describing a large black animal like a seal with a terrible voice that creates terror. There are several creatures that this legendary one might be based off of. Australian fur seals often get trapped inland during flooding and make a cry that is similar to the one associated with the bunyip. Another possibility is that the creature is based on fossilized animal skeletons, like that of a prehistoric kangaroo relative, Procopodon. These creatures were supposedly giant, over 500 pounds in weight, and could have raised their arms well above their heads, creating something that would be altogether unfamiliar to an explorer who saw it. Vampire deer. This mysterious animal is not as gruesome as the name and appearances suggest. The vampire deer, or musk deer, are real and inhabit the mountainous lands of Asia. However, these endangered creatures are best known for their fierce saber teeth, which gives them a terrible reputation. Rather than blood-sucking ghouls, the musk deer found outside in the hills of Pyeongchang are fewer horror stories than just harmless herbivores with surprisingly long teeth. Nemean lion. Many strange, incredible, mythological creatures in Greek mythology, none more than the amazing, ferocious lion of great size and strength that terrorized Peloponnese farmers. It was said to only have fallen when pitted against Hercules, who likely beat the lion. While obviously many of these stories are less one-to-one recreations of events than allegories for lessons to be taught, there may be some basis for a massive, ferocious lion. Perhaps surprising for most modern readers, lions didn't exist in Greece until classical times. The Asiatic lion had a much more extensive range than it does today. They did live in the Peloponnese in 1000 BC, but survived in Greece until as late as the 4th century AD. As there is little doubt that lions existed in the vicinity of Nima centuries ago, it's totally plausible that the story of the Nemean lion had some basis in reality, similar to how Hercules was likely based on either folk memories of the Neolithic period or a natural person or people who had their stories embellished over the years. The story of the Nemean lion, stripped of mythical elements, may simply be a folk record of man versus beast between the humans and lions of the early Neolithic period. Rocks. Most closely related to the emus or ostriches, the elephant bird evolved when the bird ruled the earth and likely existed on Madagascar for 60 million years. Legends around the rock told of a giant bird large enough to carry an elephant in its claws, which seems incredible but may not be that far from the truth. Famous explorers like Marco Polo described the rock in their travelers' tales. Some stories claim the fearsome rock ate elephants, but these giant birds were strictly an herbivore. They went extinct around 1000 to 1200 AD due to human activity. El Chupacabra. As one of the most famous legendary monsters globally, in 1995 the El Chupacabra was the go-to culprit for strange livestock deaths, creating media stir whenever sighted. The dog-like creature is said to drink the blood of livestock and act like a vampire. It goes after goats, sheep, and other farm animals and pets. These creatures have been described as hairless and wolf-like. It's believed that these sightings were simply dogs infected with a parasite called mange, which would cause them to lose their hair and create an otherworldly appearance. Their attacking livestock makes sense, as these animals would not be able to hunt in the wild due to their condition, and farm animals are easier targets. While you might not have to worry about a dog-like cryptid, try to avoid stray dogs in Mexico and Puerto Rico just for safety's sake. Unicorns. There are a few different origins for what we now understand as the unicorn, one of which is the narwhal. Through the Middle Ages and Renaissance, unicorn horn was all the rage, but the twisting, conical object that circulated around, and that we imagine in the iconic horse image, was generally the tusk of a narwhal. These are Arctic whales hunted by Vikings who would then sell their tusk at an astronomical price. In 1577, an English explorer, Martin Frobisher, led an expedition where he happened upon a dead narwhal, which he called a sea unicorn. However, there's also the other origin, explaining why we have stories of unicorns worldwide. Now known as the rhinoceros, some Indian legends told of a creature with the head of a stag and feet of an elephant, and a single black horn coming from the middle of its forehead. Just a little too similar to be a coincidence. Hobbits. Tolkien may have imagined a wild world, but as it turns out, it may not be otherworldly and fantastical as it seems. We once had our own species of hobbits on Earth, as it turns out, by Homo florensis. This was an ancient species of hominin, human, and our closest ancestor who lived on the Indonesian island of Flores. In 2004, a skeleton was found in Liang Bua called LB1. They stood at under 4 feet tall and had a mix of modern and more archaic bodies, including a brain just 1/3 the size of ours. Archaeologists also found tools resembling the Oldowan style predominating around 2 million years ago. A popular theory for their size rests on a phenomenon known as island dwarfism. Animals on islands tend to become smaller and smaller due to limited resources. This is seen in the pygmy elephants of Malta, the dwarf Burmese python, and some dinosaur species. It's believed that over their potential 700,000 lifespan, H. florensis over time. We have our number one on the list next, but we've covered some incredible cryptids and mythological creatures with very real backstories. We're constantly discovering new things, and we look forward to when someone can explain the likes of Mothman or Nessie in the future. Did you see a favorite on the list, or do you think we missed a big one? Let us know, and maybe you'll see your choice in a future video. If you want more unique, engaging, and sometimes downright wild content, go ahead and subscribe to the channel for us. And while you're at it, make sure you hit the notification bell so you never miss a single video. Platypus. Now, some animals are so weird that even seeing them in the flesh won't convince you. In 1798, John Hunter, captain of the Royal Navy, sent a pelt and a sketch of the animal back from his Australian travels. However, European naturalists refused to believe that such an animal could exist. Even when the platypus was described in scientific literature by George Shaw, he admitted apologetically that skepticism was usual in this case, that even having seen it himself, he still doubted it. While not traditionally a cryptid as some on the list, the platypus so thoroughly threw European naturalists that they couldn't classify it for quite some time. Even now, considering everything about a platypus is a strange endeavor in and of itself. Alright, that's it for today. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Forever Green, and hit that bell icon for more. See you in the next one.